Hey, stop scrolling. Tonight we're going back, way back, to 1000 BC, to the Nile Delta, where the sun burns bronze into your skin and the river brings life to endless sand. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Are you tucked in? Good. Because tonight, you're not just listening to history, you're living it. You are Ka-em-Waset, a priest of Thoth, a keeper of scrolls, a man who asks too many questions. And tonight, you're going to discover something impossible, something that won't make sense for 3,000 years, something that modern scientists will find in mummies and refuse to believe. Because how could ancient Egyptians have cocaine in their bodies when coca plants only grow in South America? And how could they reach South America 3,000 years before Columbus? They couldn't. But you did. So dim the lights, close your eyes, and let me take you back to the day your impossible journey began. The day you stopped being a simple priest and became a man who would cross an ocean no Egyptian should have crossed. The day you found the sacred leaf that would follow you into eternity. You are Ka-em-Waset, 32 years old, a priest of Thoth in the city of Memphis. The year is 1000 BC, give or take a few decades. No one keeps exact records the way you wish they would. You wake before dawn, as always, in your small mud brick house near the temple complex. The room is dark and cool, a relief from the heat that will come later. Your sleeping mat is woven reed, scratchy but familiar. You've slept on this mat for 5 years, since you completed your temple training and earned your own dwelling. Your wife, Neferet, breathes softly beside you. She's younger than you, 24. Married to you for practical reasons. Her father was a wealthy grain merchant who wanted connection to the priesthood. You don't love each other, not romantically, but you've built something comfortable, respectful. She manages the household, you serve the temple. It works. You rise without disturbing her, your joints creaking slightly. Your back aches. You spent yesterday afternoon bent over scrolls in the House of Life, copying medical texts in hieratic script. Your fingers are still cramped from gripping the reed brush. You're not built for physical labor like the farmers or quarrymen. You're built for thinking, for reading, for asking questions that sometimes annoy your superiors. The pre-dawn air is cold. You wrap a simple linen kilt around your waist, the fabric worn soft from many washings. You're due at the temple in 1 hour for morning prayers and offerings. But first, you need to think. You've been troubled by a question for weeks now, and it won't leave you alone. The scrolls speak of substances that ease pain, that bring visions, that heal. But some of these substances, you've never seen them. They're not in Egypt. Where do they come from? You walk through the awakening streets of Memphis toward the Temple of Thoth. The city is stirring. You hear the sounds of vendors setting up their stalls in the market, the lowing of cattle being driven to slaughter, the chanting of other priests beginning their morning routines. Memphis is vast, the capital of the two lands, where the black earth of the delta meets the red earth of the desert. You've lived here all your life, and sometimes you feel suffocated by familiarity. The Temple of Thoth rises before you, limestone walls catching the first rays of sunlight. Thoth is the god of wisdom, writing, magic, and measurement. As his priest, you're responsible for maintaining the temple's extensive library, copying important texts, and assisting in rituals that require knowledge of sacred words. It's prestigious work, not as powerful as being a priest of Ra or Amun, but respectable. Your father was proud when you were accepted for training at age 12. You enter through the eastern gate, nodding to the guard who knows you by sight. The courtyard is filling with priests in white linen, their shaved heads gleaming. You join them, falling into familiar patterns. The morning ritual is soothing in its predictability. Offerings of bread, beer, incense and flowers to Thoth's statue. Prayers in the old language that you understand, but most Egyptians don't. The smell of burning myrrh mixing with lotus flowers. The coolness of the stone floor under your feet. But today, your mind wanders. Yesterday you were copying a medical papyrus from the Old Kingdom. A text describing a pain-relieving substance called the Leaf of Visions. The text claimed this leaf came from the land beyond the Great Green, but gave no specifics. Egypt trades with Punt to the south, with Byblos and other Levantine cities to the north and east. But the Great Green, the sea, extends far beyond Egypt's normal trade routes. Where could such a leaf come from? And more importantly, do any samples exist in Egypt? If so, you want to see them. The House of Life is your sanctuary. It's a 2-story building attached to the temple's west side, filled with wooden shelves holding hundreds of papyrus scrolls. Some are ancient, from the time of the pyramids, crumbling and precious. Others are newer, copied just decades ago. The air here smells of papyrus, dust, and the natron salt used to preserve documents. Light filters through high clerestory windows, illuminating floating dust motes. You're not alone. 3 other scribes work here, older men mostly, content to copy texts without questioning them. You greet them quietly and make your way to the medical section. Egyptian knowledge is organized by category: religious texts, administrative records, mathematical calculations, medical treatments, magical spells, astronomical observations. You're particularly interested in medicine because it intersects with magic, and magic intersects with the unknown. You find the papyrus from yesterday. It's old, the reed fibers brown and brittle. You unroll it carefully on a reading table, using smooth stones to hold the edges flat. The hieratic script is elegant but challenging, an older form of Egyptian that's harder to read than contemporary writing. You run your finger along the lines, reading slowly. There. The Leaf of Visions, brought by the Gehennu traders from the land beyond the Great Green, when properly prepared, releases pain from the body and opens the mind to the gods. It must be chewed or brewed in hot water. The Gehennu are Libyan peoples, nomadic tribes from the western desert. They trade with Egypt regularly, bringing ostrich feathers, salt, and exotic goods from their travels. But they're not seafaring people. How would they get something from beyond the Great Green? Unless they traded with someone else, someone who did cross the sea. You feel a thrill of excitement. This is exactly the kind of puzzle you live for. You decide you need to speak with Gehennu traders. Memphis has a foreign quarter where traders from many lands live temporarily. You need permission to leave the temple during working hours, which means asking your superior, the chief lector, priest Amenhotep. He's a conservative man who doesn't approve of curiosity. Chief lector priest Amenhotep is 60 years old, stern-faced, and utterly uninterested in questions that don't serve immediate practical purposes. His office is in the temple's administrative wing, a small room with plastered walls painted with scenes of Thoth judging souls. A narrow window overlooks the temple garden. Amenhotep sits behind a low desk, reviewing grain inventory scrolls. He doesn't look up when you enter. You wait respectfully. In Egyptian hierarchy, you don't speak until acknowledged. Minutes pass. You study the wall paintings, the palette of colors. Red ochre, yellow ochre, white gypsum, black charcoal, blue and green copper compounds. Finally, Amenhotep sets down his scroll and looks at you. His expression is neutral, but you know him well enough to recognize irritation in the slight tightening around his eyes. Ka-em-waset. You should be copying the Book of the Dead for the priest Hor-em-heb. He commissioned it 2 months ago and still waits. His voice is dry, dusty as old papyrus. You bow slightly. I'm working on it, Honored One, but I have a question about a medical text. I found reference to a substance I don't recognize. I wish to investigate its origin by speaking with Tijahenu traders in the foreign quarter. Amenhotep. You ask too many questions. The old texts contain many references we don't understand. That doesn't mean you need to investigate every single one. Copying texts is your job, not interpreting them. But this substance could have medical value. If we understood it better. Ka-em-waset. His voice sharpens. The knowledge of the ancients is preserved in the texts. If the gods wished us to understand more, they would provide understanding. Your job is to copy accurately, not to question. He pauses. However, the Temple of Ptah is hosting a gathering of foreign traders in 3 days. They want a priest to observe and ensure no blasphemy occurs in their celebrations. You may go as temple representative, satisfy your curiosity there, and then return to your actual. 3 days feel like 3 years. You complete your assigned work, copying chapter 17 of the Book of the Dead for the priest Hor-em-heb, but your mind is elsewhere. You keep thinking about that phrase, the land beyond the Great Green. The Great Green is what Egyptians call the Mediterranean Sea, and beyond it lies the unknown. Egyptian ships sail to Byblos and Crete, but those are still the Great Green itself, not beyond it. What lies beyond? Another sea, another land entirely. The thought makes you dizzy with possibility. Finally, the day arrives. The gathering at the Temple of Ptah begins at sunset. You bathe carefully, shave your head and face, dress in your best white linen robe, the one Neferet keeps folded with sprigs of dried hyssop to keep it fresh smelling. You tell her you're attending a temple function. She nods without interest, busy preparing bread for tomorrow. Your marriage is like this. Parallel lives, rarely intersecting except in practical matters. The Temple of Ptah is older and grander than your Temple of Thoth. Ptah is the creator god, patron of craftsmen and architects, and his temple reflects this with magnificent stonework. The foreign quarter sprawls around the temple's south side, a chaotic mix of mud brick houses, market stalls, and temporary structures where traders from many lands live during their business in Memphis. Tonight, the courtyard is filled with foreigners, Nubians with their dark skin and elaborate braided hair, Levantines with long beards and colourful robes, Greeks in their strange draped clothing, and yes, Jehenu Libyans with their distinctive tattoos and leather garments. A feast is laid out: roasted duck, fish, bread, dates, beer in large ceramic jugs. Musicians play drums and flutes. It's noisy, chaotic, and exciting. You feel out of place in your formal priestly garb, but you're here officially, so you have an excuse to observe and speak with anyone. You scan the crowd, looking for Jehenu traders. You spot a group of them near the far edge of the courtyard, drinking beer and laughing. You take a deep breath and walk. The Jehenu trader with the scarred arm steps forward, looking you up and down with barely concealed amusement. He's shorter than you, but broader, with muscles built from years of desert travel. His face is weathered leather, his eyes sharp and assessing. He speaks Egyptian with a thick accent, but understandably. A priest of Thoth comes to speak with desert wanderers. "What do you want, holy man?" We've made our offerings, paid our temple taxes. We're in good standing. You bow slightly, respectful but not subservient. I don't question your piety. I come seeking knowledge. I'm a lector priest, a keeper of texts. I've been reading old medical scrolls and found reference to a substance called the Leaf of Visions. The text says it comes from lands beyond the Great Green, and that Gehennu traders sometimes bring it. I wish to learn more. The man's eyes narrow. Behind him, his companions have gone quiet, watching. The scarred man glances at them, then back at you. Why? What's your interest in such things? Are you seeking visions for yourself? That's dangerous business for a temple priest. No, you say quickly. I'm interested in its medical properties. For healing. The text suggests it relieves pain. This is true, though not your only interest. You're also fascinated by the mystery of its origin. The man studies you for a long moment, then seems to make a decision. You're honest enough, I think. Yes, we know of this substance. Though we call it by a different name, we call it the coca leaf. We don't bring it from beyond the Great Green ourselves. We get it through trade chains that stretch far, far west and south, through peoples who trade with other peoples, until finally someone brings it from somewhere. No one really knows where it originates, only that it comes from very far away, from a land no Egyptian has ever seen. Your heart races. This is more than you'd hoped for. Do you have any? Could I see it? The scarred man laughs. See it? Holy man, it's worth more than gold by weight. We sell it to physicians and priests who can afford it, small amounts, carefully measured. It's rare as phoenix feathers. The scarred trader, whose name you learn is Imazu, leads you away from the feast, deeper into the foreign quarter. The streets here are narrow, packed earth between mud brick buildings that lean toward each other like drunken friends. Oil lamps flicker in doorways. You hear conversations in a dozen languages, smell unfamiliar spices cooking, see goods displayed that you don't recognize. This is Memphis, your home city, yet you've never ventured into this quarter before. It feels foreign, dangerous, exciting. Imazu stops at a doorway hung with a faded red cloth. He pushes it aside and gestures for you to enter. You hesitate. Entering an unmarked building in the foreign quarter is not something priests do. But curiosity wins over caution. You duck inside. The room is small, dim, lit by 2 oil lamps. A man sits on a low stool, elderly, perhaps 70, with skin so dark he must be from deep Nubia or beyond. His hair is white, pulled back in braids decorated with small shells. He wears robes of indigo-dyed linen, expensive and foreign. His eyes are milky with cataracts but seem to see through you anyway. On a low table before him sit various items, dried plants, seeds, strange artifacts you don't recognize. Imazu speaks to the old man in a language you don't understand. The old man nods slowly, then switches to Egyptian, accented but clear. A priest seeks the sacred leaf. Unusual. Most who come to me are physicians or wealthy men seeking pleasure. You have the look of a scholar, not a pleasure seeker. You bow respectfully. I am Ka-Em-Waset, lector priest of Thoth. I seek knowledge, not pleasure. I've read of this leaf in ancient texts and wish to understand its properties and origin. The old man smiles, revealing gaps where teeth should be. Knowledge is more dangerous than pleasure, young priest. But I will show you. The old man reaches into a leather pouch at his side and produces a small bundle wrapped in linen. He unwraps it carefully, revealing dried leaves, small and oval-shaped, yellowed with age but still intact. They smell faintly of something you can't quite identify, earthy, slightly bitter. This is coca, he says simply, from a land so far west and south that most people think it's a myth, a land across not one sea, but two. Where the sun sets and keeps going. Your mind reels. 2 seas? That's impossible. Beyond the great green lies only more water, surely. But the old man speaks with such certainty. You lean closer, studying the leaves. They look ordinary, like any number of plants that grow along the Nile. How does one use it? The people of that distant land chew the leaves with lime, ground from seashells or certain stones. The combination releases the leaf's power. It takes away hunger, exhaustion, pain, makes men strong enough to climb mountains, keeps soldiers awake for days, opens the mind to visions if used in sacred ceremony. He pauses. It can also destroy a man if used carelessly. All-powerful medicine is also poison. The difference is only in the amount and the intention. You nod. This aligns with Egyptian medical understanding. Opium, mandrake, henbane, all useful, all dangerous. May I purchase some for study? The old man's milky eyes seem to focus on you more sharply. You want to study it, or use it. Study, you say firmly. I'm a scholar. I wish to understand how it works, document its properties. Perhaps grow it in Egypt, if possible. Make it available to physicians. The old man laughs, a dry sound like papyrus rustling. You cannot grow it here. It requires mountain air, cool nights, specific soil. It will never thrive in your hot delta, but I will sell you a small amount. For study, he names a price. High, but not impossible for you to afford with your temple stipend and some savings. You leave the old merchant's room with a small leather pouch containing precious coca leaves, your entire month's stipend lighter. Imazu walks you back toward the main streets, and you grip the pouch like it contains gold. In a way it does. This is knowledge made physical, mystery solved. Or rather, mystery deepened, because now you have more questions than when you started. As you walk, you ask Imazu about the trade routes. You said the coca comes through many hands. Can you tell me more? Where does it begin? How does it reach Egypt? Imazu considers, then speaks. The chain is long. Traders from far south of Nubia bring strange goods north. They get them from other traders, who get them from others. Somewhere in that chain is a people who sail, not on the Great Green, but on another sea, one that lies far to the west. They bring goods from that distant land, coca, strange-coloured feathers, metals we don't know, rubber that bounces. These reach the sailing peoples of the western coast, who trade with the Jehenu, who trade with Egypt. The chain stretches across the world, priest. No one person travels the whole distance. Goods pass from hand to hand like water flowing downhill. This makes sense. It's how Egyptian trade works too. Egyptian merchants don't travel to Punt themselves. They trade with intermediaries. But the idea of another sea far to the west, a land beyond it, your mind struggles to conceive of such distances. How far must these coca leaves have travelled to reach your hands? You reach the edge of the foreign quarter, where wider streets and Egyptian buildings begin. Imazu stops. Be careful with that knowledge, priest. Some things are not meant to be understood too deeply. The coca is sacred to the people who grow it, far away. Using it lightly dishonours them. Remember that. You nod seriously. I will respect its power. Thank you, Imazu. You bow, and he returns the gesture before disappearing back into the narrow streets. You stand alone, clutching your pouch, feeling like the world has suddenly become much larger than you'd imagined. You arrive home well after dark. Neferet is already asleep. She retires early, needing to wake before dawn to prepare bread. You're grateful not to face her questions tonight. You light an oil lamp in the small room you use for personal study, close the door quietly, and spread the coca leaves on a low table. There are perhaps 20 leaves, dried and brittle. You examine each one carefully by lamplight, making mental notes. Oval shape, about the length of your thumb, prominent central vein, with smaller veins branching off in parallel lines, color varying from yellow-brown to greenish-brown, depending on how well preserved. The texture is papery, delicate. The smell is subtle, earthy, slightly musty from age, with something underneath that's almost medicinal. You take out a fresh sheet of papyrus and your writing tools. By lamplight, you begin to document everything: the leaves' physical description, what you've learned about their origin, the trade chain Imazu described, the method of use the old merchant mentioned. Your handwriting is neat, despite your excitement. Years of scribal training keeping your script steady and precise. You draw a picture of a leaf, carefully rendering its shape and vein pattern. You write questions. Can these be analyzed further? Can Egyptian physicians verify their pain-relieving properties? Most importantly, is it possible to trace them back to their actual source? This last question lodges in your mind and won't leave. The idea of a land so far west that no Egyptian has ever seen it, across 2 seas. It seems impossible. Yet the evidence sits before you. These leaves exist. They came from somewhere. If they exist, then that land exists. And if that land exists, it can theoretically be reached. A dangerous thought forms. What if you could trace the trade route backward? Not just ask traders, but actually follow the path these leaves traveled. See this distant land with your own eyes. Document it properly. Prove its existence. Bring back not just leaves, but knowledge. You shake your head. Impossible. You're a priest, not a traveler. You have duties, a position, a wife. You can't just abandon everything to chase a mystery across the world, can you? Sleep doesn't come easily that night. You lie on your reed mat beside Neferet, listening to her soft breathing, your mind racing. The coca leaves are hidden in your study, but they might as well be burning brands for how much they occupy your thoughts. You keep imagining the journey they took, passed from hand to hand across impossible distances, from a land you can't even picture, to your small house in Memphis. Each transfer was a small miracle. Somewhere far away, a plant grows on a mountainside you'll never see. Someone harvested these leaves. Someone dried them. Someone packed them for travel. And through a chain of dozens or hundreds of transactions, they reached your hands. The enormity of the world hits you. You've lived your entire life in Memphis and its immediate surroundings. You've read about distant lands, Punt, Crete, Byblos, the lands beyond Nubia. But you've never seen them. To you, they're just names on scrolls, abstract concepts. But they're real, filled with real people living real lives, speaking languages you've never heard, worshipping gods you've never encountered, knowing things you can't imagine. And somewhere far beyond even those distant lands lies the place where coca grows. You could spend the rest of your life copying scrolls and never understand the world beyond Memphis, or you could try to see it, really see it, not through the words of ancient texts, but with your own eyes. The thought terrifies and exhilarates you in equal measure. By dawn, you've made a decision, or rather, accepted the decision that's been forming since you first read about the coca leaf. You're going to find its source, not through questions and second-hand knowledge, but by following the trade route yourself. You'll document everything, prove it's possible, bring back knowledge that will amaze Egypt. You'll become the first Egyptian to deliberately seek out and reach this far western land. The fact that you have no idea how to accomplish this, that you have no experience with sea travel or foreign languages, that you'll be abandoning your comfortable position, these objections in your mind. But you push them aside. You'll find a way. You spend the next 3 days in careful planning. You can't simply announce you're leaving on a mad quest to find the source of a mysterious leaf. You'd be thought insane, or worse, possessed by demons. You need a plausible reason to travel, one that won't raise suspicions. You also need to learn what you can about Western trade routes, about sea travel, about the peoples who might know the way. You return to the foreign quarter, this time during daylight, asking questions of traders. You're careful to seem casually curious rather than obsessed. You learn that Phoenician sailors are the most experienced with long sea voyages. They've sailed beyond the Great Green, down the coast of Libya, seeking trade goods and new markets. A Phoenician captain named Hallo recently arrived in Memphis with a cargo of purple dye, timber from the cedars of Lebanon, and stories of sailing far south along the African coast. You seek him out. Hanno is perhaps 45, weathered dark by sun and salt, with a thick black beard and laugh lines around shrewd eyes. He speaks Egyptian well, having traded with Egypt for decades. You meet him at a tavern near the docks, sharing beer as you carefully probe for information. "I've heard," you say casually, "that there are trade routes that extend very far west, beyond where most Egyptians travel. I'm interested in documenting these for the temple archives." This is plausible. Temples do keep geographic records. Hanno studies you with those shrewd eyes. You're not the first priest to ask me about distant lands. Most are satisfied with stories. You have the look of a man who wants more than stories. You hesitate, then take a risk. If I wanted to travel west, very far west, following trade routes, would it be possible? Hanno laughs. Possible? Yes. Advisable? Number. You're a temple priest, not a sailor. The sea is dangerous, foreign lands more so. You'd need passage on a trading vessel. You'd need to be useful to the crew. You'd need languages you don't speak. He pauses. Over the next week, you meet with Hanno 3 more times, hammering out details. The voyage will last at minimum 6 months, possibly as long as a year. The route: down the Nile to the Delta, across the Great Green to Phoenician ports for supplies, then south and west along the coast of Libya and beyond, seeking trade opportunities with peoples who rarely see Egyptian or Phoenician merchants. Hanno's goal is commercial, finding new sources of ivory, gold, exotic goods. Your goal is different, but compatible. He needs a scribe to record transactions and keep manifests. You need passage and protection while you search for information about the coca leaf's origin. The hardest part is telling Neferet. You choose an evening when she's in good spirits, after a successful day at the market. You've prepared dinner yourself: fish, bread, dates, beer, trying to soften the blow of what you're about to say. After the meal, as she's clearing the dishes, you speak. Neferet, I have news. The temple is sending me on an extended research journey. I'll be traveling with Phoenician merchants, documenting trade routes and foreign peoples for the archives. I'll be gone for many months. She stops, holding a clay dish, and turns to look at you. Her face is unreadable. Months? How many months? 6, perhaps more. It's important work. She sets down the dish carefully. You're lying to me. The temple isn't sending you anywhere. You're choosing to go. You're stunned. You thought you'd crafted the lie carefully. How did you... You think I don't notice? You've been distracted for weeks. You spend every evening in your study. You come home smelling of the foreign quarter. You've been planning something. She sits down across from you, her face sad but not angry. I'm not a fool, Khaim Waset. I may not be educated like you, but I know my husband. You're leaving because you want to, not because you must. So tell me the truth. You're silent for a long moment. Then you tell her everything. The coca leaves, the mystery, Hanno's voyage. The next 2 weeks pass in a blur of preparation. You resign from your temple position, not officially, but by requesting an extended leave of absence for personal study. Amenhotep is furious, calling you irresponsible and ungrateful, but ultimately he can't stop you. You're not a slave, you're a free man, and if you choose to abandon your career, that's your right, even if it's foolish. You sell most of your possessions, keeping only what you'll need. A few changes of clothing, your writing materials, your precious coca leaves carefully wrapped. A small amount of silver for emergencies. Neferet takes the proceeds from the house. Your father left it to you, but she'll need funds to live on while you're gone. You're effectively leaving her everything. It feels like the least you can do. She's neither warm nor cold in these final days. She helps you pack with efficient movements, answers your questions about practical matters, but doesn't discuss feelings or the future. On your last night at home, you lie beside her on the sleeping mat as you have for 8 years, but you might as well be strangers. In the darkness, you try to say something meaningful. Neferet, if I don't return, you'll return, she says simply. You're too curious not to. You'll want to tell someone about everything you've seen. She's right, and you know it. If you die on this journey, it won't be by choice but by misfortune. In the morning, you dress in traveling clothes. A simple linen kilt and tunic, leather sandals, a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the sun. You look nothing like a priest anymore. Just a man, ordinary, setting out on a journey. Neferet walks you to the door. She hands you a small package, bread, dates, cheese wrapped in cloth. Provisions for your first days of travel. You try to embrace her, but she steps back, maintaining distance. Go, she says. Before I change my mind about this being a good idea. You go. You don't look back. If you do, you might lose your nerve. Hanno's ship is called the Astarte, named after the Phoenician goddess of love and war. It's a merchant vessel, perhaps 15 meters long, with a single mast and a square sail dyed red. The hull is painted with protective eye symbols, a Phoenician tradition to ward off evil spirits of the sea. When you first see it at the Memphis docks, it looks impossibly small to cross vast waters, but Hanno assures you it's sturdy, built from Lebanese cedar, watertight and seaworthy. The crew consists of 12 men, Hanno as captain, his younger brother Eshmanazar as first mate, 8 sailors of various origins, Phoenician, Greek, Egyptian, even one dark-skinned man from far south of Nubia, a cook, and now you, the scribe. You're given a small space below deck to store your belongings, a corner near the stern, just large enough to lie down, dark and smelling of tar and bilge water. It's less comfortable than your study room in Memphis, but it's yours. The crew regards you with curiosity and some amusement. A temple priest on a trading voyage. They've seen strange things, but this is novel. You try to be friendly, learning their names, asking about their work. Some warm to you, particularly the Egyptian sailor, a man named Jedi, who's happy to have someone who speaks his language well. Others remain distant, waiting to see if you'll be useful or just another mouth to feed. The ship is loaded with trade goods, papyrus scrolls, linen cloth, glass beads, bronze tools, sealed amphoras of wine. These will be traded along the way for other goods. Ivory, gold dust, exotic woods, animal skins, whatever the market offers. You have no goods to trade, but Hanno has given you a small budget to purchase interesting samples of plants and materials you encounter. This is your official role, documenting new substances that might have value to Egyptian physicians and temples. On the 3rd morning after your arrival, Hanno gives the order to cast off. Ropes are untied, oars are deployed, and slowly, ponderously, the Astarte pulls away from the dock. You stand at the stern, watching Memphis recede. The city where... The first week on the Astarte is miserable. You've never been on a boat before, and your body rebels against the constant motion. Seasickness hits you the moment you reach the delta, and the Nile's current begins to rock the ship more vigorously. You spend 2 days hanging over the rail, vomiting everything in your stomach, and then dry heaving when there's nothing left. The crew finds this hilarious. Even Hanno, who's sympathetic, can't help smiling at the sight of a learned priest reduced to and clutching his belly. Jedi, the Egyptian sailor, takes pity on you. He brings you bread, eat small amounts constantly. Don't let your stomach get empty. And shows you where to look, at the horizon, not at the deck. Your eyes and your belly need to agree about whether you're moving. Look at something stable. It helps, slightly. By the 3rd day, you can keep down bread and weak beer. By the 5th day, you're merely nauseated rather than actively dying. You try to make yourself useful despite the sickness. You can't haul ropes or climb rigging. You lack the strength and skill. But you can organize cargo, update the manifest, keep the ship's logs. Hanno has you record everything: wind direction, distance traveled, estimated by experienced eye, notable landmarks along the shore, depth soundings, any encounters with other vessels. You write in hieratic script, which most of the crew can't read, but Hanno understands enough to verify your recording accurately. The Nile Delta is a maze of channels and marshes. Reed beds stretch to the horizon, inhabited by crocodiles and hippos and countless water birds. You pass fishing villages where naked children wave from muddy banks. You see the great lighthouse of Alexandria in the distance, one of the wonders of the world, though you're too sick to properly appreciate it. Finally, after 8 days of river travel, the Nile opens into the Great Green, the Mediterranean Sea. The water changes color from brown to blue-green. The smell changes, no longer the rich mud scent of the Nile, but salt and something else, something vast and foreign. The Great Green is nothing like the Nile. The river was contained, predictable, with visible shores on both sides. The sea is vast, endless, with waves that rise higher than a man and crash over the bow, soaking everything with salt spray. The ship rises and falls, pitches and rolls, and you discover new depths of seasickness you didn't know existed. But gradually, impossibly, your body adapts. By the end of the 2nd week at sea, you can eat a full meal and keep it down. By the 3rd week, you can work without constantly gripping something for balance. You're becoming a sailor, though a poor one. Hanno's route follows the coast. They never lose sight of land completely, which is both reassuring and practical. If a storm comes, they can seek shelter in a bay. If supplies run low, they can stop at a coastal town to trade for fresh water and food. You make port at several Phoenician settlements: Tyre, Sidon, Byblos. These cities are ancient, wealthy from generations of trade. Their harbours are filled with ships from across the known world. You see Greek vessels with their distinctive painted eyes, Egyptian grain ships, strange boats from the distant Black Sea. At each port, you leave the ship and explore, stretching your legs and gathering information. You visit marketplaces, asking traders about goods from distant lands. You learn that the Phoenicians have trade connections that extend incredibly far, east to Mesopotamia, north to the lands of the Greeks and beyond, south along the African coast. But when you ask about lands far to the west, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the straits that mark the edge of the Great Green, you get vague answers. Some traders mention settlements on Atlantic islands. Others speak of sailing south along the African western coast. But no one speaks of crossing the Atlantic itself. That's considered impossible. Endless water, no land, just sailing until you fall off the edge of the world or are eaten by sea monsters. You don't mention the coca leaves yet. You're waiting, learning, trying to understand the full scope of trade networks before revealing. After 3 months at sea, with stops at a dozen ports, the Astarte reaches the Pillars of Heracles, the narrow strait where the Mediterranean meets the Atlantic Ocean. The geography is dramatic. Massive rock cliffs rising on both sides, the water rushing through the narrow gap with tremendous force. Hanno's crew tenses, concentrating on navigation. Getting through the strait requires perfect timing with the currents. If you misjudge, you'll be dashed against the rocks or swept backward. The ship makes it through, and suddenly, you're on the Atlantic. The water is different here, darker, colder, with swells that are more powerful than Mediterranean waves. The sky seems larger, more threatening. This is the edge of the known world. Egyptian maps don't show what lies beyond here. Even Phoenician knowledge becomes vague and contradictory. Hanno turns the ship south, following the African coast. This is his plan: to sail farther south than most Phoenician traders go, seeking new peoples to trade with, new sources of valuable goods. For weeks, you sail along an increasingly strange coastline. The land becomes more arid, endless desert reaching to the sea. Then forests appear, thick and green. Unlike Egyptian or Phoenician vegetation, the people change too. You see settlements of dark-skinned peoples who've never encountered Phoenicians before. They're cautious but willing to trade. Ivory for bronze tools, gold dust for glass beads, exotic animal skins for linen cloth. You begin asking about the coca leaf at each trading stop. You show your carefully preserved samples to local traders, asking if they recognize it, if they know where it comes from. Most don't recognize it at all. A few, merchants who trade with peoples farther south and west, have heard of something similar. A sacred leaf, one tells you through an interpreter, from the islands where the sun sets, far across the water, very far. He gestures west, toward the endless ocean. Your heart races. The islands where the sun sets. Could he mean? The merchant's information is frustratingly vague, but it's more than you had before. Islands where the sun sets. Somewhere far to the west, out in the Atlantic. But how far? Days? Weeks? Months? No one can say because no one he knows has actually been there. The information comes through many traders, each adding or subtracting details, until truth and legend are impossible to separate. But you notice a pattern in these conversations. Several West African traders mention contact with peoples from islands in the Great Water. These island peoples occasionally come to the mainland to trade, bringing strange goods, unusual feathers, rubber that bounces, plants not found in Africa, and yes, occasionally, something that sounds like the coca leaf. Always it's described as extremely rare and expensive, traded through multiple hands before reaching the coast. You become obsessed with this mystery. Every evening, while the crew drinks beer and tells stories, you sit with your wax tablets drawing maps, trying to piece together a coherent picture from contradictory information. If islands exist far to the west, and if people on those islands have contact with the coca leaf, then there must be land even farther west. A continent, perhaps. Could the world be larger than anyone imagines? Could there be entire lands beyond the ocean that no Egyptian or Phoenician has ever conceived of? Hanno watches your obsession with concern. Ka Waset. We're traders, not explorers. Our route takes us south along the coast, eventually turning around and heading home. We don't have supplies for a voyage into the unknown ocean. That's suicide. But if we just sail west for a few days, you argue, just to see if there are islands. If we find them, we could trade, learn more. If we don't, we turn back. A few days detour. Hanno shakes his head. You don't understand the ocean. There are no landmarks. If we sail west and lose sight of land, we might never find our way back. The winds and currents could carry us anywhere. We could circle until our supplies run out, and we all die of thirst. He's right, and you know it. 5 months into the voyage, something changes. The Astarte rounds a massive cape at the southwestern edge of Africa. The crew calls it the Cape of Storms, and you understand why when you experience the massive waves and wind that nearly swamp the ship. But after surviving the Cape, the ship enters calmer waters heading north again, and Hanno makes an unexpected decision. We're stopping at an island, he announces. The Canary Islands, far off the coast. I've been there once before, years ago. The people there have connections to other islands even farther west. If your mysterious coca leaf land exists, someone there might actually know something real, rather than rumors. Your heart soars. This is more than you'd hoped for. The Canary Islands. You've heard vague mentions of them in Phoenician ports, but they're at the very edge of known geography. Hanno makes it clear this is his decision, not yours. There's trade goods there worth the detour. Dye plants, volcanic glass. But while we're there, you can ask your questions. The voyage to the islands takes 4 days of open ocean sailing with no land in sight. The most terrifying 4 days of your life so far. No coastline to follow, no landmarks, just endless water in all directions. And Hanno navigating by sun position, star positions, and some mysterious sense he claims all experienced sailors develop. But on the 5th morning, land appears. A green island rising from the sea with a massive mountain at its center, the peak smoking, an active volcano. The islands are inhabited by a people unlike any you've encountered. Fair-skinned despite the sun, speaking a language related to the Berber tongues of North Africa, but distinct. They live in stone houses, practice agriculture, and are familiar with Phoenician traders. They welcome the Astarte with cautious hospitality. And when you show them the coca leaf, something incredible happens. An elderly woman examines it and nods. Yes, the sacred leaf. From the far, far lands, beyond the great water. 3 months sailing. The elderly woman's name, translated through multiple linguistic layers, is something like Tamazite. She's a healer and keeper of traditional knowledge on the island. She invites you to her stone house, along with Hanno and the island's headman, to discuss the sacred leaf in more detail. Sitting on woven grass mats in her dim, cool home, she explains through laborious translation. Her people occasionally encounter boats from islands even farther west, the Cape Verde Islands, and beyond those other islands whose names don't translate. These distant island peoples sometimes bring trade goods from an enormous land far across the ocean. A land so vast it takes months just to sail along its coastline. A land of great mountains, vast rivers, and peoples with skin like bronze, not black like Africans, nor pale like northern peoples, but a distinct colour all their own. The coca leaf comes from that land, high in the mountains according to the stories. It's sacred to the peoples there, used in religious ceremonies and for medicine. The journey to obtain it is incredibly dangerous. Crossing the Atlantic takes months, requires perfect navigation, favourable winds, and tremendous luck. Many boats are lost, but occasionally, rarely, trade boats make the crossing both ways, and exotic goods from that distant land reach the Canaries, and from there, very rarely, make it to mainland Africa and eventually into the Mediterranean trade network. Tamazite looks at you with sharp, intelligent eyes. You want to go there, to see this land yourself. I can see it in your face. You nod, unable to speak. You're a fool, she says, not unkindly. The journey kills most who attempt it, but, she pauses. There's a boat leaving soon, a Cape Verde trader heading home. From Cape Verde, if you're lucky and willing to wait, you might find a boat crazy enough to make the big crossing. It happens every few years. Men who seek adventure, or exile, or are simply tired of life. She looks at Hanno. Your captain won't do it. The conversation with Hanno that evening is painful. You stand on the beach, away from the crew, watching waves crash on volcanic sand. You can't do this, Hanno says, his voice a mix of anger and genuine concern. You're not a sailor. You don't know navigation. You speak no useful languages beyond Egyptian and barely functional Phoenician. If you leave the Astarte here, you're on your own. How will you even get home? I'll figure it out, you say, knowing how weak that sounds. I've come this far. I can't turn back now. We're talking about proving the existence of an entire unknown continent. Do you understand what that means? This could change everything. How we understand the world, trade routes, geography, medicine. It could also mean you disappear forever, Hanno interrupts. Ships are lost all the time on easy coastal routes. You want to cross an ocean no Egyptian has ever crossed, to a land no one can confirm exists, based on stories and some dried leaves. He's right. Every rational part of your brain knows he's right. But the irrational part, the part that made you leave Memphis in the first place, is louder. I have to try, you say simply. I didn't come all this way to stop now. If I return to Egypt having only gotten this far, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering, what if? I can't live with that. Hanno, you're the most stubborn man I've ever met. And I've met many stubborn men. He's silent for a moment. Then, the Cape Verde boat leaves in 3 days. I'll negotiate passage for you. I'll give you some trade goods, bronze tools, glass beads, things that are valuable anywhere. You'll need them. You try to thank him, but he waves you off. Don't thank me. I'm probably helping you kill yourself. Just, if you do make it back to civilization, eventually, tell people the Astarte and Captain Hanno treated you well. That's all the thanks I need. You spend the next 3 days preparing, obsessively. You transfer your precious coca leaf samples to a new, better-sealed container. You organize your notes, making copies of your most important maps and observations. You practice basic phrases in the Canary Island language with The boat to Cape Verde is even smaller than the Astarte, barely 10 meters long, with a crew of just 5 men. It's a fishing and trading vessel operated by Cape Verdeans who make the dangerous run to the Canaries twice a year, trading salt and dried fish for manufactured goods they can't produce themselves. The captain, a grizzled man named Antonio, a name you can barely pronounce, speaks a language that sounds vaguely like Phoenician, but is clearly something else. Portuguese, though you don't know this word. He accepts Hanno's payment of bronze tools and glass beads for your passage, eyeing you suspiciously. Hanno has vouched for you as a scholar and scribe, not mentioning your mad quest. The voyage to Cape Verde takes 6 days of open ocean sailing. These 6 days make all your previous sailing experience seem easy. The boat is so small that every wave feels like it might capsize you. There's no proper shelter, just a canvas cover you can huddle under. Food is dried fish and hard bread, water strictly rationed. You're seasick again, your body having forgotten its hard-learned lessons. But worse than the physical discomfort is the psychological reality. You're truly on your own now. The Astarte is gone, heading back to civilization. You're on a tiny boat with strangers who speak a language you don't understand, heading to islands even more remote than the Canaries, with only a vague plan to somehow find passage across the Atlantic to a land that might not exist. At night, lying on the wet deck under the canvas, watching stars wheel overhead, you have moments of pure terror. What have you done? You've abandoned your wife, your career, your entire life, chasing a mystery that you might never solve. You could die out here, and no one in Egypt would ever know what happened to you. Your name would just stop. No burial rites, no afterlife, nothing. The Egyptian part of you that still believes in the proper order of things is screaming, but you've come too far to turn back now. Cape Verde appears on the 7th morning, a cluster of volcanic islands rising from the sea, even more barren and remote than the Canaries. The islands are inhabited sparsely, small fishing communities, a few traders. The 2 months on Cape Verde are the longest of your life. Time moves differently here, measured not by days, but by the slow rhythm of fishing boats going out and returning, storms passing, the wind shifting. You rent a small room in a stone house from a local family, paying with glass beads. They feed you fish, so much fish you'll never want to see fish again, and hard bread made from imported grain. You learn basic Portuguese words through necessity. Water, food, boat, west, far, dangerous, crazy. People shake their heads when you ask about crossing to the far lands. Crazy, morte, death. But you persist. You spend your days at the harbour, talking to every boat that comes in, asking about the Atlantic crossing. Most captains laugh at you. Some get angry. It's bad luck to even talk about it. A few are philosophical. Yes, the far lands exist. Yes, boats sometimes make it there, but more boats are lost. Much more. The winds have to be perfect, the timing right, the supplies sufficient, the gods willing. It's not something you plan rationally. It's something desperate men do. You meet other desperate men. Exiles, criminals, adventurers, fanatics. Cape Verde collects them like driftwood. One night in the island's only tavern, you meet a man who changes everything. His name is Gonçalo, Portuguese, perhaps 50 years old, missing his left eye and 2 fingers on his right hand. He's captained boats for 30 years, traded up and down the African coast, been to the far lands twice, and survived to return. He's planning a 3rd voyage, not for profit. His trading days are over, just to see it one more time before he dies. I have a boat, he says, drunk on palm wine. I have a crazy crew. We leave in 3 weeks when the winds turn. You can come if you pay. You have almost no money left. You offer him everything. Your remaining trade goods, your promise to scribe the journey, your labor on the boat. Gonçalo looks at you with his one good eye. Why? Why does an Egyptian priest want to see the far lands so badly? You tell him everything. The coca leaves, the mystery, the need to know, to understand, to prove. Gonçalo's boat is called São Miguel, named after a Portuguese saint you've never heard of. It's slightly larger than Antonio's fishing boat, but still terrifyingly small for an ocean crossing. Maybe 12 meters long, with a single mast and patched sails that look like they've survived 1,000 storms. The crew consists of 6 men besides yourself and Gonçalo, a Portuguese first mate named João, 2 Cape Verdean sailors, 1 Greek who's running from something he won't discuss, and 2 Africans from somewhere far down the coast. 8 men total to cross an ocean. 8 men in a wooden shell trusting their lives to wind and Gonçalo's half-mad certainty. The 3 weeks before departure pass in frantic preparation. You help load supplies, barrels of water, the most precious cargo, dried fish, hard bread, beans, dried fruit, tools, spare sailcloth, rope, tar, weapons, because there might be hostile peoples on the other side, and trade goods, because if you survive, you might as well profit. Every inch of space is packed. You'll be sleeping on deck under a canvas shelter, sharing the space with cargo and 7 other men. Privacy is impossible. Comfort is a joke for 30 days, if you're lucky. You spend your remaining glass beads on materials to protect your journals and coca leaves from salt water. Waxed canvas, a waterproof pottery jar, multiple wrappings of oiled leather. The coca leaves are now more precious than your life. If you die but they survive, if someone finds them and brings them back to civilization, at least there will be evidence. Proof that you tried. Proof that the far lands exist. The night before departure, you can't sleep. You lie on the beach under stars, listening to waves, thinking about everyone who told you not to do this. Amenhotep, Neferet, Hanno. They were all right. This is insane. The odds of survival are terrible. But you're doing it anyway, because the alternative, going home, admitting defeat, spending the rest of your life wondering, is worse than death. At least, that's what you tell yourself. The truth, which you barely admit even internally, is simpler. You're addicted to the question. You have to know, whatever the cost. Dawn. The winds are from the east, perfect for westward sailing. Gonzalo shouts orders, and the crew responds with practiced efficiency. You help where you can, hauling ropes, pushing the São Miguel through the shallows until it floats free. You scramble aboard, soaking wet to the waist, and find your assigned position near the stern. The sail unfurls, catches wind, and suddenly you're moving. Away from Cape Verde, away from any land, into the open Atlantic. The first day is beautiful in a terrifying way. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension. You've crossed the Mediterranean, sailed along the African coast, but this is different. This is truly open ocean. No land visible in any direction. Just water and sky meeting in a perfect circle around you. You're at the center of a world made of nothing but blue. The wind is steady, pushing from behind, and the São Miguel surges forward, spray flying from the bow. Gonzalo stands at the tiller, his one eye on the horizon, a slight smile on his weathered face. He loves this. This is where he belongs. You envy his certainty. By the second day, you're seasick again. Your body apparently needs to relearn ocean travel with each voyage. But you force yourself to eat, to drink your ration of water, to work. Gonzalo has made it clear. Everyone works or everyone dies. There are no passengers. You help with sail adjustments, take turns at the tiller, though you're terrible at it, and João usually corrects your course. Help with cooking the one hot meal per day, bail water from the bilge. Your hands, already calloused, develop new blisters that break and callous over. You're becoming something new, something harder. On the third day, you see your first ocean monster. That's what the crew calls it. A massive fish, longer than the boat, that surfaces beside the São Miguel, blows a column of water into the air, and dives again. A whale, though you don't know this word. Gonzalo laughs at your terror. They don't harm boats. They're good luck. The ocean is full of wonders, scribe. This is just the beginning. Days blur together. Wake, eat dried fish and hard bread. Check your water ration, precious, never enough. Work, adjust sails, bail water. Take your turn at watch, eat again, sleep fitfully on the hard deck. Repeat. The monotony is broken only by fear when storms appear on the horizon. You've learned to recognize the dark clouds that mean trouble, and wonder when you see things you can't explain. Flying fish that leap from the waves, strange lights in the water at night, bioluminescence, though you'll never know this word. Distant waterspouts twisting between ocean and sky. You keep your journal faithfully, though the pages are stained with salt water and the writing is cramped. You record wind directions, estimated distances traveled, notable sightings, thoughts on navigation. You're creating a document that could help future travelers, if anyone finds it, if you ever make it back to civilization. On the 10th day, Goncalo shows you how he navigates. A combination of sun and star positions, wind patterns, bird sightings, certain birds mean land, is within a few days, and pure instinct built from decades at sea. There are no maps, no instruments beyond a simple rope with knots to measure speed, just experience and educated guessing. You're crossing an ocean on faith. The psychological strain is worse than the physical. Day after day of seeing nothing but water, no landmarks, no way to know if you're going the right direction. What if Goncalo is wrong? What if the far lands don't exist? What if you've sailed past them in the night? These thoughts come in the dark watches, when you're alone with nothing but ocean sounds and your own doubts. You combat them by focusing on the coca leaves. They exist. They had to come from somewhere. Somewhere ahead there is land. There has to be. On the 15th day, the food situation becomes critical. You're eating less than half what you need. Your body is consuming itself. Everyone is thin, haggard. Tempers fray. 2 crew members fight over a perceived slight. João breaks them apart. "Save your energy," Goncalo says. "We're halfway." Maybe. Can't tell. On the 18th day, a storm hits. It comes fast, the sky turning from blue to black in less than an hour. Goncalo shouts orders, his calm facade cracking. "Lower sail! Secure everything! Anyone who can't hold on gets washed overboard." The crew moves in controlled panic. You help where you can, lashing down cargo, tying ropes to anything solid. When the first massive wave hits, you're thrown across the deck, slamming into the gunwale hard enough to crack ribs. You can't breathe. João drags you to the mast and ties a rope around your waist, securing you. "Hold on! Don't let go!" he shouts over the rising wind. The storm lasts 3 days. 3 days of hell. Waves taller than the mast crash over the boat. Everyone bails constantly. If the water level rises too high, the boat will founder and sink. You bail until your arms are dead, then switch hands, then bail some more. You can't see anything through the rain and spray. Up and down have no meaning. The boat is just a toy in the hands of an angry god. You're certain you'll die. Everyone is certain. But they keep bailing, keep fighting. Because what else is there? On the 2nd night of the storm, one of the Cape Verdean sailors is washed overboard. One moment he's there, the next he's gone, swallowed by the dark water. No one can help. No one can even look for him. His rope broke, or he didn't tie it properly, or a wave was just too strong. It doesn't matter. He's gone. The remaining 7 crew members bail harder, each thinking, "Not me. Please, not me." When the storm finally breaks on the 4th morning, you're alive. 7 survivors on a battered boat that's somehow still afloat. The sail is torn, half the water barrels are broken, supplies are scattered or lost. But you're alive. Goncalo takes stock silently, then nods. 18 days out, maybe 12 more to land. Maybe. We ration what's left. We keep going. No one argues. Going back is impossible now. The days after the storm are the darkest. Food is running critically low, maybe 3 days of rations left. Water is worse. 1 good barrel remains, meaning each man gets about a cup per day. Barely enough to survive. You're all dying slowly of thirst and starvation, growing weaker each day. The sun is merciless. Your skin is burned and peeling. Your lips are so cracked they bleed constantly. You stop writing in your journal. You don't have the strength. Everything narrows to the immediate. Breathe. Sip your water ration. Chew your small portion of dried fish. Bail water. Sleep. Repeat. On the 25th day, birds appear. Not seabirds, land birds. Small brown birds that land on the rigging, exhausted from their own journey. Gonzalo's one eye lights up. Land! 2, maybe 3 days. The crew's spirits lift slightly. You allow yourself to hope. But 3 more days with almost no food and minimal water. Can you last? You're not sure. None of you are sure. On the 27th day, someone sees floating vegetation. Seaweed, but the kind that grows in shallows, not deep ocean. Land is close. The wind picks up, favorable, pushing you west-southwest. Gonzalo is at the tiller constantly now, refusing to rest, scanning the horizon obsessively. You do the same, your sun-damaged eyes straining to see anything different, any hint of land. And then, on the morning of the 29th day, there it is. A thin, dark line on the western horizon. At first you think it's clouds, but it doesn't move. It grows. It's land. Real, solid, impossible land. A continent no Egyptian has ever seen. The far western world. The crew is too weak to cheer loudly, but you can see it in their faces. Relief, joy, disbelief. You made it. 30 days, actually 29, across an ocean, and you're still alive. Gonzalo allows himself a small smile. I told you, he says to no one in particular. I told you it was real. The landing is not triumphant. The São Miguel is barely functional, the crew barely alive. Gonzalo navigates along the coast for half a day before finding a suitable harbour, a natural bay with a beach. The boat grounds on sand, and you simply fall over the side into shallow water, too weak to climb down properly. You crawl onto the beach and lie there, face in the sand, sobbing with relief. Solid ground. Earth that doesn't move. You made it. Against all probability, you made it. The land is overwhelming after a month of seeing nothing but water. Trees, massive trees unlike any in Egypt or Africa, covered in vines and strange flowers. The air smells green, alive, humid. Bird calls unlike any you've ever heard. The heat is oppressive, different from Egyptian heat, thick with moisture. You lie on the beach for hours, unable to move, just breathing, feeling earth beneath you instead of rolling deck. The local people find you before you find them. At first you don't even notice, you're half delirious from dehydration and malnutrition. Then suddenly there are figures standing over you. Your sun-damaged eyes struggle to focus. They have bronze skin, not black like Africans, not pale like Europeans, but a distinct colour all their own, just as the stories said. They wear minimal clothing, loincloths, simple wraps. They have straight black hair, dark eyes that watch you warily. They speak a language that sounds like nothing you've ever heard. You try to sit up and the world spins. Someone offers you a container, wood, beautifully carved, full of water. You drink desperately, gasping. More people arrive. They're cautious but not hostile. They've seen foreign boats before, rarely, but it happens. Gonzalo manages to stand, tries to communicate through gestures. The universal language of traders, showing goods, making peaceful signs. The locals seem to understand. They help the crew off the beach, carrying those too weak to walk, including you. You're taken to their village, laid in a simple shelter, given more water and a mash of something, corn, though you've never seen corn before. You spend 3 weeks in the indigenous village recovering. Your body slowly remembers how to be alive. The broken ribs heal enough that breathing doesn't hurt constantly. Your destroyed hands scab over and start to grow new skin. The sun damage begins to fade under the ministrations of local healers who apply cool pastes made from plants you don't recognize. Most importantly, you eat. Real food. Fish freshly caught, roasted over fires. Strange vegetables and fruits. Corn, beans, squash, peppers, tomatoes, potatoes. Things that don't exist in the old world. Your stomach, shrunken from starvation, expands slowly. You gain weight, though you'll never be anything but lean. The village is fascinating. The people live in communal structures, beautifully built from wood and thatch. They practice advanced agriculture, terraced fields on the hillsides, irrigation systems, crop rotation. They have pottery, weaving, metalwork in copper and gold. They're not primitive savages as some Mediterranean peoples imagine distant tribes. They're sophisticated, with their own complex culture. You try desperately to learn their language, picking up basic words through observation and gesture. Water. Food. Thank you. Where? You point at everything, repeating the words children teach you with amused patience. Gonzalo and the surviving crew are recovering too, but with different goals. They're here to trade, exchanging their bronze tools and glass beads for gold, exotic feathers, rubber. They'll rest, repair the São Miguel, then head home. Gonzalo makes this clear. 3 months. We rest and trade for 3 months. Then we must leave. The winds change. If we wait too long, we'll be trapped here another year. You nod, but you're not listening. Because you've seen something that makes your heart race. In the village healer's collection of medicinal plants, carefully dried and stored in ceramic jars, you recognize the distinctive shape of coca leaves. You're finally, actually here. In the land where coca grows naturally. The village healer, whose name sounds like Kusi to your ears, agrees to take you to see coca growing wild. It requires a 3-day journey into the mountains. Goncalo thinks you're insane. You're barely recovered from near death, and you want to climb mountains in unfamiliar terrain. But he doesn't stop you. You came all this way for leaves. Go see your leaves. Just don't die before we sail home. I don't want to explain to anyone how I brought you across an ocean just to lose you to a mountain. The journey is hard, but nothing compared to the ocean crossing. Kusi leads, followed by 2 young men from the village who serve as guides and carriers. You struggle to keep up, your body still weak, your lungs burning in the thin mountain air. You climb for 2 days through changing vegetation, tropical forests giving way to cooler mountain forests, then to high grasslands. The 3rd morning, Kusi stops and points. There, coca. You see them growing wild on the mountainside, bushes with small oval leaves, exactly like the samples you've carried for a year. They grow at this specific altitude, in this specific climate. Cool nights, warm days, mountain soil. Kusi shows you how the locals cultivate them too, planting them in terraced gardens, tending them carefully. The leaves are sacred, she explains through gestures and the few words you share. Used in religious ceremonies, chewed with lime by workers to give strength and endurance. Offered to the gods, traded as precious goods. This plant is woven into every aspect of life here. You spend the entire day examining the coca plants, making detailed notes, drawing careful illustrations. You take leaf samples with Kusi's permission, pressing them between layers of bark to preserve them flat. You document everything: the altitude, though you have no precise way to measure, the soil type, the companion plants growing nearby, the climate, the cultivation methods. This is what you came for. This knowledge, this proof. No one can deny this plant exists, that it comes from this specific place, that an Egyptian priest crossed an ocean to find it. You return to the village with samples, knowledge, and a sense of completion. You spend the next month learning everything you can about coca, how it's prepared, its various uses, the rituals surrounding it, the trade networks that distribute it across this vast unknown continent. You learn there are entire empires inland, vast civilizations with cities, roads, armies, wealth that would rival Egypt. The peoples here call themselves by many names, but you'll never know the word Inca or Quechua. You just know that you've discovered proof of something that will astound the world. A sophisticated civilization completely unknown to Egypt, Greece, Phoenicia, or any Mediterranean power. But now comes the hard part: getting home alive. Goncalo's crew has repaired the São Miguel and traded successfully. They have gold, exotic feathers, samples of rubber, and other goods that will make them wealthy if they survive the return. The boat is restocked with food and water. The winds are turning favorable for eastward crossing. "We leave in 1 week," Goncalo announces. "Anyone coming, be ready. Anyone staying, may the gods protect you." He looks at you when he says this. There have been other sailors, over the years, who reached the far lands and decided to stay, to never face the ocean again, to live out their lives in this green, warm place. You consider it for about 5 seconds before shaking your head. You have to return. You have to tell people. The knowledge means nothing if it dies with you. The village gives you gifts for your journey: woven cloth, dried food, a beautifully carved wooden amulet of a local god for protection. Kusi gives you a large bundle of coca leaves, carefully prepared and wrapped. "For the journey," she says in her language, "for strength." You embrace her, this woman who helped you complete your quest, and you realize you'll probably never see her again. This land, these people, this incredible place. You're leaving it all behind, carrying only samples and knowledge. It seems like too little, but it's all you can carry. The return voyage is somehow worse than the outward journey. You know now what to expect, and that knowledge is terrifying. 30 days of open ocean, if you're lucky. Storms, starvation, thirst, possible death. But at least the winds are favorable. The trade winds push east across the Atlantic with more consistency than the westward winds. Goncalo is confident. You're not, but you have no choice. You must get home. The samples mean nothing if they stay here. The knowledge means nothing if it's not shared. You force yourself to be brave. The voyage follows a similar pattern to the outward journey. Days of endless blue, rationed food and water, the constant work of sailing, the psychological strain of isolation. But you're stronger now than you were. Your body has been hardened by the first crossing. You know how to sail, how to navigate, how to conserve energy. You're still sick frequently. Your stomach never fully adapted, but you function despite it. You keep your journal faithfully, documenting the return route, wind patterns, anything that might help future travelers. You're creating a record that could open trade between the old world and the new, if you survive to deliver it. On the 15th day, you pass the halfway point. On the 20th day, food is running low again. On the 25th day, you spot familiar birds, African species. Land is near. On the 27th day, Cape Verde appears on the horizon. You made it. You actually made it. Both ways. Goncalo slaps your shoulder, grinning with his scarred face. Scribe, you're either blessed by the gods or too stupid to die. I haven't decided which. You laugh, giddy with relief and exhaustion. Cape Verde means safety. From there, coastal sailing to Phoenicia. From there, the Mediterranean. From there, Egypt. Home. You're going home. From Cape Verde, the journey becomes easier. Coastal sailing to Phoenicia, stopping at familiar ports where Goncalo trades his exotic goods for tremendous profit. At each port, you ask about Egyptian ships heading home. Finally, at Byblos, you find one, a grain trader heading to Alexandria. You negotiate passage with your remaining trade goods. Goncalo says farewell with surprising emotion. You're the maddest man I've ever sailed with, scribe. May your gods protect you. And if you write about this journey, remember that Goncalo got you there and back alive. You promise you will. You owe him your life, many times over. The grain ship is large, slow, safe, boring after the São Miguel. But boring is wonderful. You have your own small cabin, regular meals, no risk of death. The 10-day voyage to Alexandria feels like a holiday. You spend it organizing your notes, preparing your presentation, rehearsing what you'll say to temple authorities. You have evidence, coca leaves, botanical drawings, detailed journals, observations of an entirely unknown continent. They have to believe you. They have to understand what you found. Alexandria is overwhelming after a year away. The city is massive, crowded, noisy. You're used to small villages and open ocean. The press of humanity makes you anxious. But you're here. You're in Egypt. Almost home. You buy passage up the Nile to Memphis on a passenger boat. The Egyptian delta is as you remember. Green, fertile, impossibly familiar. You see the temples, the cities, the life you left behind. It feels both intimately known and completely foreign. You're not the man who left. You've seen too much, changed too much. Memphis appears around a river bend, your home city. You disembark at the docks, the same docks where you boarded Hanno's Astarte 14 months ago. You stand there, bag over your shoulder, looking at the city. You don't know where to go first. Your house? Neferet? The temple? Part of you wants to delay, to not face what comes next, because you suspect, deep down, that what comes next won't be the triumph you've imagined. But you've come too far to stop now. Neferet is home. When she opens the door, she stares at you for a long moment, her face unreadable. You're a stranger, tanned, bearded, wearing foreign clothes, looking nothing like the husband who left. Then recognition hits. Ka-em Waset? You're alive. Her voice is flat, neither joyful nor angry. Neutral. Shocked, maybe. You nod. I came back. I said I would. She looks at you for another moment, then steps aside. Come in. The house is exactly as you remember. Nothing has changed. Neferet has lived here, maintained everything, continued her life. You sit on familiar cushions, drink familiar beer, eat familiar bread, and feel completely out of place. This was your life. Now it's a museum of someone else's existence. Neferet sits across from you, studying your face. You look old, she says finally. Weathered, like you've been somewhere terrible. You nod. The Atlantic Ocean. A continent beyond it. I found the coca's source. I have samples. I have proof. She doesn't seem impressed. And that was worth abandoning your wife for 14 months. Worth giving up your career, your position, everything we built. You want to say yes. You want to explain the importance, the magnitude of what you've discovered. But looking at her face, this woman who shared your life for 8 years, who you treated as a convenience rather than a partner, you realize you don't know how to explain. How do you make someone care about knowledge for knowledge's sake? How do you justify the cost? I'm sorry, you say finally. I had to do this, but I'm sorry for what it cost you. She's silent for a long moment. You can stay here while you're in Memphis. The house is still yours. But I'm not your wife anymore. Not really. You left me. I've been managing fine without you. She's right. You know she's right. The marriage was never based on love, and even the practical partnership is broken now. I understand, you say. That night, you sleep in your old study, not in the bedroom. You present your findings to the Temple of Thoth 3 days later. Amenhotep, your former superior, agrees to see you, though his message made his disapproval clear. You arrive at the appointed time, carrying your samples and journals carefully. Amenhotep receives you in the same office where you asked permission to visit the foreign quarter 14 months ago. He looks older. You probably look ancient to him. He doesn't invite you to sit. Ka-em Waset, you return. I confess, I expected you died in some foreign land chasing your mad quest. His voice is cold. I succeeded, you say simply. I found the source of the coca leaf. I crossed the Atlantic Ocean to an unknown continent. I've brought back samples, detailed journals, botanical drawings, observations that will change everything we know about geography, medicine, trade. He raises his hand, stopping you. Show me. You spread everything on his desk. The coca leaves, both your original samples and the fresh ones from the source, showing they're identical. Your drawings of the plants, your maps showing the Atlantic crossing, your notes on the indigenous peoples, their agriculture, their civilizations. It's all there. A year of your life documented in papyrus and plant samples. Amenhotep examines everything in silence. The silence stretches. Finally, he looks up. This is interesting. But it proves nothing. You stare at him. What? It proves everything. The leaves exist. The land exists. I crossed an ocean. You crossed something, he interrupts. You claim to have crossed the Atlantic to an unknown continent, but how do we verify this? Perhaps you sailed south along the African coast and obtained these samples from some remote tribe. Perhaps you're lying about the distance. Perhaps these indigenous peoples you describe are just African tribes with unusual customs. Your drawings could be imagination. Your maps could be fiction. Your mouth opens but no words come. You hadn't considered this, that they simply wouldn't believe you. But the leaves, they're identical to the ancient samples. Yes, Amenhotep says, which means there is a source somewhere. Over the following weeks, you try everywhere. You approach physicians at the Temple of Imhotep, showing them the coca leaves, explaining their properties. Some are mildly interested. A new pain-relieving substance has value. But none care about the journey or the distant continent. They just want to know if they can cultivate the plant in Egypt. They can't. And whether you can obtain more through trade, you probably can't. You're a curiosity, nothing more. The strange priest who disappeared and came back with tales of impossible voyages. You try the Greek scholars in Alexandria. They're more open-minded, more interested in geography and exploration. But without independent verification, they catalogue your claims as unconfirmed reports, possibly exaggerated. Your detailed journals and maps are filed away as interesting but unverified. One kind scholar tells you, return with a Phoenician captain who confirms the route. Return with native peoples as witnesses. Return with trade goods that can only come from this far western land. Then we'll believe. But you can't. Gonzalo has retired. The journey killed him. He died 6 months after returning home, his body finally giving out after decades of sea abuse. You're alone, the only witness. And one witness is not enough. The worst is when you try to publish your findings. You hire a scribe to make clean copies of your journals, paying from your dwindling funds. You try to get them distributed, but temples aren't interested in publishing speculative geography. Merchants don't care about lands they can't trade with profitably. The few copies that circulate are read as entertainment, adventure tales, probably fictional, possibly based on some truth, but certainly exaggerated. Your life's work becomes a curiosity, a story, not knowledge, not truth, just interesting fiction. You move out of Neferet's house, your former house, renting a single room near the foreign quarter. You survive by doing translation work, copying texts, basic scribe jobs. Your coca samples you keep carefully preserved. They're all you have. Physical proof that means nothing, because no one believes where they came from. You're 40 years old, broken and dismissed. 15 years pass. You're 55 years old now, an age many Egyptians don't reach. Your health is failing. The rigors of the Atlantic crossing, the years of poor nutrition, the accumulated stress, they're catching up. You develop a persistent cough, your joints ache, walking becomes difficult. You continue your copying work because you must eat, but it's harder each year. Your eyes are going bad, making precise hieratic script difficult. You're becoming obsolete, old, forgotten. Neferet remarried 10 years ago, a grain merchant, a practical match for a practical woman. You saw her once in the market, surrounded by children that weren't yours. She looked happy. You were glad for her. You've had no wife, no children, no family. Just your knowledge and your samples. They're cold comfort in your final years. But something changes in your last year of life. You're approached by a young priest of Thoth, barely 20, named Imhotep, ironically the same name as the ancient architect. He's read your journals, one of the few copies that survived. He seeks you out in your tiny room. Master Khaim Waset, I read your account of crossing the Great Western Ocean. Tell me, was it real? Did you truly see these lands? You look at this young, eager face, so much like your own 40 years ago, and you're tempted to lie, to say it was fiction, exaggeration, youthful fantasy, to save him from the obsession that consumed your life. But you can't. Every word is true, you say. I crossed the ocean. I saw the lands. I brought back proof. You show him the coca leaves, still preserved after 2 decades. But no one believed me. My advice to you, don't follow my path. Some knowledge is too expensive. He doesn't listen. Of course he doesn't. You didn't either at his age. He leaves with fire in his eyes, already planning. You'll probably never know if he attempts his own journey, or if wisdom stops him. But you've passed on the truth to one person who believes. Maybe that's enough. You make your final arrangements carefully. You've saved a small amount, enough for a simple burial. You visit a mortician, one who works in the foreign quarter, less expensive than the prestigious temple embalmers, but competent. You make an unusual request. When you die, you want to be mummified in the traditional way, but with additions. You want your coca leaf samples wrapped with your body. Specifically, you want them placed in the wrappings over your heart. The mortician looks at you strangely. Dried plants? In the wrappings? Why? You don't explain fully. You just say they're sacred to you, important. and you pay extra for his agreement to honor this strange request. 2 months later, you feel death approaching. The cough is worse. You're coughing blood now. Breathing is difficult. Your body is shutting down. You're not afraid. You faced death before on the Atlantic, and it held no terror then. Now, it's almost a relief. You're tired. So very tired. On your last day, you sit in your room, holding your coca samples one final time. You remember everything. The mountains where they grew. Kusi's kind face. The terror of the ocean. Gonzalo's laugh. The impossible moment when land appeared after 30 days of water. You remember being young and curious, and certain that knowledge was worth any price. You're still not sure if you were right, but you paid the price anyway. You die quietly in your sleep, alone in your tiny room. Your body is discovered the next morning by your landlord. The mortician, remembering your instructions, collects your body and your carefully preserved coca samples. He does his work with professional care, removing organs, treating the body with natron salt, wrapping it in linen. And, as requested, he places the coca leaves in the wrappings over your heart. They're secured with resin, sealed in place, bound into your eternal form. If anyone ever unwraps you, they'll find them. Physical proof wrapped with your bones, truth preserved in death, since it couldn't be recognized in life. 3,000 years pass. Egypt rises and falls. The pharaohs end. Greeks conquer Egypt. Romans come. Christianity spreads. Islam arrives. Egypt transforms again and again. Through it all, your mummy rests in its simple grave outside what was once Memphis. The wooden coffin rots away. Desert sand shifts, burying you deeper. The cemetery is forgotten, built over, lost to time. You're one of millions of anonymous Egyptian dead, your name forgotten, your story lost. Just bones and dried tissue and linen wrappings, waiting in the dark. In 1992 CE, German archaeologists excavate near the ruins of Memphis. They're studying commoner burials, trying to understand daily life in ancient Egypt, rather than focusing on kings and temples. They find dozens of simple burials, including yours. You're catalogued as Burial 47, male, approximately 50 to 60 years at death, probable priest based on dental work and bone structure. Your mummy is transported to a laboratory in Munich for analysis. This is routine. Egyptian mummies are common in museums and research facilities. No one expects anything unusual. But then, the analysis begins. As part of a comprehensive study, your mummy is tested for various substances. Hair analysis, what little hair remains, tissue samples, anything that might reveal information about ancient Egyptian diet, health, and life. A German toxicologist named Svetlana Balabanova runs tests for various organic compounds. She's not looking for anything specific, just doing a comprehensive analysis that's now possible with modern technology. And she finds something impossible. In your hair, in your tissue, preserved after 3 millennia. Cocaine. Not opium, which would be expected in Egypt, not any substance that should be there. Cocaine, a compound that comes exclusively from the coca plant, which only grows in South America, which wasn't reached by Europeans until 1492, which should absolutely, definitely, impossibly not be in an Egyptian mummy from 1000 BC.
The scientific paper is published in 1992, Discovery of Cocaine and Nicotine in Egyptian Mummies. It causes an immediate uproar. Cocaine should not exist in ancient Egypt. It's impossible. The coca plant only grows in South America. No evidence exists of transatlantic contact in the Bronze Age. Therefore, the results must be contamination. Modern cocaine somehow getting into the samples. Or fraud, or testing error. The scientific establishment largely rejects the findings. But Dr. Balabanova is certain. She runs more tests. She tests other Egyptian mummies from secure museum collections. She finds cocaine in several more, and also nicotine, from tobacco, another American plant. The findings are replicated by other laboratories. The evidence is undeniable. Cocaine is present in multiple ancient Egyptian mummies. The question becomes, how? 3 theories emerge. Theory 1. Contamination. Modern cocaine got into the samples somehow, perhaps from laboratory equipment or handling. This is the preferred explanation of mainstream archaeology. But testing protocols make this unlikely. The cocaine is inside tissue, not on surfaces. It's in hair shafts that were sealed in wrappings for millennia. Theory 2. Alternative source. Perhaps there's an old-world plant that produces cocaine-like compounds that we haven't identified. Maybe ancient Egyptians had access to a now extinct plant that mimicked coca's chemistry. But no evidence for such a plant exists, and botanists say it's highly improbable. Theory 3. Transatlantic contact. Ancient peoples somehow crossed the Atlantic, centuries or millennia before Columbus. They traded goods between continents, including coca leaves and tobacco. This is the most shocking theory, challenging everything established history teaches. Most scholars reject it outright, but some don't. Some archaeologists and historians begin looking at other evidence with new eyes. Your mummy becomes famous. Burial 47 is written about in journals, debated in conferences, featured in documentaries. You're no longer anonymous. After 3,000 years, you're recognized. Not by name, your identity is lost forever, but as evidence. Physical proof that ancient peoples accomplished far more than modern scholars believe. In the decades following the discovery, more evidence accumulates. Other ancient mummies test positive for cocaine and nicotine. Ancient Egyptian artifacts are re-examined. A small statue that might depict corn, maize, an American crop. Tomb paintings showing plants that don't quite match old-world species. References in ancient texts to lands beyond the sunset that were dismissed as mythology. Some scholars begin to take the transatlantic contact theory seriously. Maybe ancient peoples were better sailors than we believed. Maybe trade networks extended farther than we imagined. Maybe the oceans weren't barriers, but highways. But the debate remains heated. Most mainstream archaeologists reject the theory. They point to the lack of physical evidence beyond the alkaloids in mummies. Where are the American artifacts in Egyptian tombs? Where are the Egyptian artifacts in American sites? If regular trade existed, there should be abundant archaeological evidence. A few controversial finds are claimed. Egyptian-style hieroglyphs in New Mexico, probably modern forgeries. Roman coins in North America, probability. Brought by later travelers. Stone anchors off Brazilian coast that might be Phoenician, probably natural formations. None is definitive. The scientific community remains divided. Some see the cocaine mummies as proof of humanity's ancient seafaring achievements. Others see them as a contamination mystery still unsolved. The truth lies buried in time, impossible to fully prove or disprove. But the evidence exists. Your mummy exists. The coca leaves wrapped around your heart exist. They're physical proof that something happened. That somehow, some way, Coca from South America reached ancient Egypt. Whether through trade, exploration, or means we haven't considered, it happened. You achieved what you set out to achieve. You proved the coca's origin, documented the journey, brought back evidence. But 3,000 years too early. In your time, no one believed. In our time, no one can fully explain. Your story exists in the gap between the impossible and the undeniable. Perhaps that's where the most important truths always exist. In the space where certainty fails and wonder.
In 2015, a Peruvian archaeologist named Dr. Rosa Mendoza makes another discovery. Excavating a coastal site in northern Peru, dated to approximately 800 BC, she finds something unexpected. A cache of trade goods that don't belong. Among the typical local pottery and tools are several small objects that seem Egyptian in design. Faience beads in colours and styles matching Egyptian New Kingdom production. A small bronze implement that could be an Egyptian razor or medical tool. And most intriguingly, fragments of papyrus. Papyrus doesn't survive well in most climates, but the Peruvian coast is extremely arid, and these fragments, though badly degraded, are identifiable as papyrus, a plant that grows only in Egypt and a few nearby Mediterranean regions. The fragments are too damaged to read clearly, but carbon dating places them to roughly 1000 BC, within a century of your death. Analysis of the faience beads confirms they're chemically consistent with Egyptian manufacture, not local copies. The bronze tool shows Mediterranean metallurgical techniques. The evidence is circumstantial, but it's physical. Egyptian objects in Peru, dated to the right period. Dr. Mendoza publishes cautiously, noting that these could be evidence of ancient trans-Pacific trade, an easier journey than transatlantic, or they could have reached Peru through multiple intermediate trades, passed from hand to hand over centuries and vast distances. But she can't dismiss the possibility. Direct contact. Ancient Egyptian traders reaching South America. The academic community reacts predictably. Excitement from some, skepticism from most. But now there are two pieces of evidence. Cocaine in Egyptian mummies, Egyptian artifacts in Peru. Both impossible, both undeniable. The conventional narrative of ancient history, civilizations developing in isolation, Columbus discovering the New World, is challenged by physical evidence from both sides of the story. Some ancient people crossed the oceans, whether they were Egyptian, Phoenician, or some other Mediterranean culture, whether they did it once or many times, whether they established trade or just made chance voyages. These questions remain debated, but they went. Today, your mummy rests in Munich's state collection of Egyptian art. You're displayed with honor, your coca leaves carefully preserved beside you, your story told to thousands of visitors each year. The debate continues. Scholars still argue about whether you represent ancient transoceanic contact, contamination that can't be explained, or something else entirely. But you're no longer dismissed. You're evidence. You're a question that demands answers. You've achieved a strange immortality, not as Ka-Mwaset the priest, but as the cocaine mummy. The evidence that humans in the ancient world were capable of more than we imagine. Perhaps somewhere, in the vast digital archives of human knowledge, a researcher will stumble across this account and make the connection. Perhaps they'll realize that Burial 47 wasn't just any anonymous priest, but a specific man with a name and a quest. Perhaps they'll search the surviving fragments of ancient Egyptian texts and find some reference to a priest who vanished for a year and returned with strange claims. Perhaps the truth of your identity will emerge, and you'll be honored not as anonymous evidence,
but as Ka-M-Waset, the explorer who crossed an ocean 3,000 years before such a crossing was thought possible. Or perhaps not. Perhaps you'll remain forever anonymous, your name lost, your journals destroyed, your story unknown, except for the physical evidence you left behind. Coca leaves wrapped around your heart and preserved for 3 millennia. Perhaps that's enough. You set out to prove that coca came from a far distant land across the ocean. You succeeded. The proof survived. The truth emerged. Not in your lifetime, not even in your millennium. But eventually, truth has patience. Evidence endures. And now, 3,000 years later, as scholars debate and researchers investigate and visitors stare at your darkened form through museum glass, you finally achieved what you set out to achieve. You've made people believe in the impossible. You've expanded human understanding of what the ancients could